This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show. And this is your host, Greg Gilbert, a.k.a. the Python Hyena. And folks, 2 years ago, it would have been June, I believe, in 2016, I had the lovely, beautiful Tami Stronach, who played the Empress in the Neverending Story, on my show. And that interview got very well received. And guess what, folks? We have her back. We got the Empress back with us. And she's got new stuff to talk about. Folks, I give you the lovely, the beautiful, the ultra-talented Tami Stronach. How do you do, Tami?
I'm very well. Thank you for that nice introduction.
I thought it was funny when I called you the other day and your daughter was in the background going, "Hi, hi."
Yeah.
Have you introduced her to the Luck Dragon yet?
Oh, she rides it to school on a daily basis. It's really a good way to travel in New York City. No, my daughter is wonderfully extroverted and outgoing and talkative and very delightful. But yes, it's hard to do an interview with her in the background.
I actually thought it was pretty funny, you know. When I called you up, I was like, she's got a good relationship with her daughter. That's positive to see, you know. I wouldn't have the patience to raise kids. So.
No. My daughter is absolutely just one of, I have the most fun with her, and she sort of brought me back to being a kid, and I feel so lucky because all the things that I love to do, like make art and tell stories and make up silly songs, are, the perfect activity. So it's like a chance to kind of go back to being a kid yourself, which I love.
Has she seen the Neverending Story?
Well, it's funny because I didn't think she had, and I was waiting until she was going to turn 8 to show it to her, and she didn't really see it, but apparently she saw it through the cracks of 2 chairs on an airline on Virgin Air. It's like on the, and so she knew what it was, and she watched it without sound through a little crack in the chairs on somebody else's console on an airline flight. That's what she told me.
Really? Wow.
So I don't know if that's considered seeing it or not seeing it. So I said, do you want to watch it with sound at some point? And she said, yeah. So she sort of has seen it, I guess.
Wow. Yeah, I remember I was telling you last time I interviewed you, you're actually 3 weeks younger than me. We're both born the same year.
Cool.
Yep. We're both July.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, you're right, the tail end. You just made it.
Yeah, I'm the last day in July 31st.
Yeah, I'm the 8th, so we're both the same year.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, one of the things I remember is you were heavily into dancing, and I remember I had somebody from the station here was have me come on his show, and he was talking to me about what I do, the interviews I do, and I know they focused in on the fact I'd interviewed Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter, and the other person that they brought up was you, and they thought it was interesting, some of the people that maybe move away from movies, and he was talking about the fact that you, if I remember correctly, ran a dance studio. Is that correct?
I had a dance company in New York City for, over 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we performed annually in New York and across the country and did some things abroad as well. But yeah, it was a dance theater company. Yeah,
and that was brought up. So, like I said, last time you were on, it was very well received. So, yeah, people like to check up and see what the Empress was up to since then. Do you get recognized for playing that part?
No, I don't. I mean, I'm 45-year-old woman now, and I was 10 in that film. So, No, but I kind of like it that way. I'm able to be recognized when I want to be recognized,
Yeah.
and I'm able to not be recognized when I am at the grocery store in my sweatpants and don't want to be recognized.
That's right. It's
So
it's probably
it,
it's probably hard to park that luck dragon, like parallel park the luck dragon.
yeah, but I have a monthly rental, so he gets that spot.
No, you know what? I actually left the province of New Brunswick here for the first time last year. I went to Horrorama in Toronto, and I was actually the guest of one of my guests. And it's interesting because I was walking around Toronto with this person, and I asked her, "Do you ever get recognized?" She said, "Only when she puts her makeup on, you know." So so it is kind of nice to have your piece. But do you ever do the conventions?
I've done a few of them, and I fit them in when I have time, and usually on just the East Coast because that way they're within driving distance and I could get back to my work in New York. But I've done a couple of them. I did Rhode Island a bunch of times, and I've done some actually education modules at the one in New York City because I'm also a teacher, and I'm really interested in the way that we can use stories to facilitate a variety of different educational settings. So I like going to the conventions, but I also am meeting people and kind of getting to know people who were fans of the story and comparing stories about the 80s and kind of, getting all nostalgic together with other people. But I also like sitting on the panels and kind of having broader discussions about the ways in which educators can use sci-fi and fantasy stories to illuminate things that are, happening in daily life and bring up topics and philosophical questions, political questions through stories.
It kind of reminds me in the Bible where Jesus used parables to emphasize something,
Yeah, well, I think the sort of metaphor is the sort of basis of all that, right? We use one image to clarify and crystallize another image, and I think sometimes it's easier to use fantasy and fiction stories to illustrate things that are happening because it kind of takes away sides. Everyone's on the same team. Everyone's dropped into a kind of fantasy world. And so it sort of allows bigger themes to be looked at without a lot of the divisions that come when you locate things in actual reality, and all of a sudden, everyone's in a different tribe and the big picture gets lost.
Yes. Well, I hope you make it up here sometime, I'm sure you know where I'm located here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, do you not?
Well, I haven't spent a lot of time in Canada, but I would love to go to Canada. I have some really good Canadian friends in New York who are artists, and I find that just generally I really like Canadians.
Yep. Well, I took the plunge last year. I never been on a plane before, and like when an actress I've been a fan of since the '80s tells me to come to a convention and be her assistant, I'm not going to say no.
That's a good plug.
And you know what? She had a blast, and she wants me to come back, and we're still in touch. So that's really awesome, and I met some good people. But it was so much fun doing the conventions, and I'm pretty sure somebody like yourself would be a big attraction at something like that.
Yeah, no, conventions are really fun, and what I think that I like the most about them is the way in which it gives people an opportunity to express their own creativity. I love seeing the costumes and the things that people make, and all the artwork that gets kind of spun off of other stories. So I think it's kind of beautiful because it really allows for a lot of creativity from audiences to kind of participate in continuing those stories and showing their own creative spin.
It's funny because when I was at Horrorama, Leslie Donaldson, a Canadian actress from the movie Curtains, was there, and she attracted really strange looking people dressed up as zombies and Freddy Krueger, and they were all drawn to her.
Yeah, I'm sure they were being very nice. So.
Well, she was saying, she said, "This is my ex-husband."
Yes, yes.
Yeah, she was having fun with it. Oh yes. So it was a lot of fun, and yeah. So I hope you get to come out to something like that here in Canada at some point. So but I need to ask. I ask this of a lot of my guests. What's the most unique thing you've ever been asked to sign?
Oh, well, I've been asked to sign, handmade books that people have made, and somebody even fashioned an orange symbol. But I think that the most unique thing that I've sort of been shown, which was really cool, was on Twitter. I don't remember the name of the artist. I'm terrible with names, but it was really cool. They made a Neverending Story, like a coffee picture of the Empress. But you know how you like go to a normal cafe and they make a little heart with the coffee on the top of your foam?
Okay, yeah.
And I'm like super impressed that anyone could make like a heart shape on my coffee. But this was like a whole beautifully rendered like drawing of the Empress with foam and coffee. I don't even know how anyone could do that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So people make amazing things and have really incredible fine motor skills.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. What do you think? The Neverending Story, that came out in 1984. What do you think all these years later that film still holds up?
I mean, it's amazing that it still holds up, but I think that, that every generation does this, right? I mean, our parents listened to the music that they listened to when they were teenagers, and we listen to the music that I know that when the 80s music comes on, like I jump up on the dance floor. I'm like, oh my God.
Oh, same here.
And so, I think it's just a normal and very understandable kind of normal path of just, that's such an incredible time in one's life. And
Yep.
As an adult, you kind of look back at your formative years and the stories and the music and the things that kind of form the basis of what you identify as your personality, So I think that the film holds up partly because it's such a beautiful story and partly because what we do is we kind of associate certain artworks with who we were at certain times in our lives. And so for me too, I'm part of it. I'm in the film, but I'm also part of the 80s. I'm part of a generation that's looking back at those formative years and has nostalgia for it. But I also think the message of the film to do what you dream and to not get lost in the mundane and the sort of boring adult world that asks you to kind of become apathetic and joyless, that's a real problem. And I think that everybody sort of struggles with how to stay, a little bit in awe of life and not lose that kind of wonder.
Oh, yeah. It's funny you mentioned that, too, because there's sometimes I can get lost in a movie based on the soundtrack. Take it, for instance, Rock of Ages had a great soundtrack. I love the movie, especially how they collided a couple songs together. And if you like 80s music, Rock of Ages is highly recommended. Tom Cruise knocks it out of the park in that. Another one I recommend is Everybody Wants Some by David Linkletter. You must have seen Dazed and Confused.
That was Dazed and Confused was from when? It was
1993.
Yeah, a long, long time ago. Yes, ages ago.
Well, the reason I bring it up, because Dazed and Confused was set in 1976.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody Wants Some just came out in a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, and it's set in 1980, and that last weekend before college starts. It's that last from from Thursday to like Monday morning. These people getting together at this fraternity and getting everything going on that weekend. And the soundtrack album just took me back, right from My Sharona in the opening, right down to the end with Good Times Roll by the Cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's got some great music. I even got the soundtrack, but the movie is fantastic as well. So that's some good nostalgia for you, And I love 80s music, and I love 80s movie. In fact, I had Tiffany on last year.
Uh-huh.
You remember the singer?
Sure.
Yeah, I had her on here last year because her debut album celebrated its 30-year anniversary.
Nice.
Yep.
Well, it's funny talking about music and nostalgia and those things. I don't know if you looked at the Beanstalk Jack album that I recently produced through Paper Canoe.
Okay.
In a way, that's kind of what that was. We took this sort of classic fairy tale for kids, Jack and the Beanstalk.
Okay.
But we updated it for modern audiences, and in particular for parents that we thought would be our age.
Okay.
And so if you put the CD on, sometimes I think music for kids can kind of not necessarily have that much to offer the parents, but we really wanted to make something that the parents would like with their kids. And so it starts with a kind of Arlo Guthrie vibe. There's a little bit of bluegrass in it when Jack is living in a shack and kind of bringing out that sort of Appalachian feel. And then when he goes up the Beanstalk, we envisioned the giant as a kind of Nashville record mogul with everything kind of supersized. He's got a supersized house and a supersized car and a supersized everything. And he has this big, fancy, expensive mansion in the sky. And we went kind of electric once he goes up the Beanstalk, and we ended up in this very 80s inspired world. So he sounds like Tom Waits, our giant.
Okay.
Who I was a huge fan of. And then we gave the giant a daughter, and we sort of thought about all of like the icons that I loved, those singers as a kid, like Cyndi Lauper and Blondie and
yep.
So kind of drawing on a lot of those kinds of things. And so the album really does trace music starting, kind of a little bit of like folk rock in the 60s, and then goes through some 70s and then 80s.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a little bit of a journey through time and a fun romp for people like me who sort of, I felt very connected to all of those musical eras. And
yes.
So it was really nice to explore the story looking at it through this sort of historical musical genres.
Yes, absolutely. Talk a little bit about Paper Canoe. That's your company, right?
Yeah, so Paper Canoe Company was formed after my daughter was born, and I was transitioning out of dancing. I'd been dancing for 20 years professionally, and while I still choreograph, I'm dancing less because dancing is kind of something that you age out of. At a certain point, you have to kind of let the young ones take over and let the rubber bands with the legs up to their heads do their thing.
Yeah.
And so, but I really didn't want to stop performing, and I also didn't want to stop making my own content. One of the big things that was really important for me in my life was always to be in a room where if I wasn't actually directing or making the content, I was with a group of artists that at least worked in an ensemble way, or, were curious and interested in about getting feedback on a creative level. And so it was just a natural fit once I had my daughter and was transitioning out of dancing to form a company that would make family entertainment. And we started with the thing that I know how to do, which is make live shows in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we made a variety of different live shows for people in Brooklyn and in Manhattan. And those were really, really, really fun. And then we decided to make an album, which is Beanstalk Jack. And that was really exciting. We won 3 awards for it. We won the Parents' Choice Award, the Family Choice Award, and the Napa Award. So that was kind of wonderful to see that it was working.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of looking at how to move into digital content and away from live things, although that we will still perform live because we really enjoy it. But there's something really interesting about challenging ourselves to kind of grow into different mediums. And so one of the things I'm really curious about doing with Paper Canoe is looking at the audiobook world.
Okay.
Because I just feel like the most magical thing a parent can do with a child is sit and read them a story.
Okay, yep.
And so the various Paper Canoe projects that we've done, I think would translate really well into the sort of podcast audio world. So, for example, creating this hybrid form where you tell our updated, modernized version of Jack and the Beanstalk, but then it's got little songs in between the narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And taking the play that we made that's a kind of dystopian sci-fi play called Light and turning that into a series of podcasts where we get, fabulous New York actors to read the voices of different characters.
Oh, absolutely.
So we're kind of taking this exploration of live theatrical events for family audiences and moving them into digital platforms. And we are also interested in video and short films. So it's kind of an exploration of how to take 20 years of live theatrical experience and then funnel it into some of these other genres. And I'm exploring the way choreography can translate into stop motion and into choreography for video, and kind of ways of making hybrid forms that are sort of interesting and exciting, that look maybe a little bit different than some of the standard things that are out there for kids that have just kind of slightly more hybrid, imaginative quality to them.
Absolutely. I was just curious. I love the name Paper Canoe. Where did you come up with that? Because you'd think the canoe would sink.
It's so funny. Everybody, there's sort of the science. There's the science brain that gets really worried about that. But first,
I like it personally, but just give me where'd you come up with that?
Well, it's actually the title of a book that talks about physical theater, which is something that I did for a long time in New York. I worked with a physical theater company, and I'm really interested in that genre. But for me, the notion of a paper canoe kind of captures what we hope the kinds of works we do will do for kids, in the sense that you take an ordinary piece of paper and you fold it a couple times, and before you know it, it's a boat. And if you set it down in the local pond or the local fountain, for a kid, they're instantly transported into this sort of magical journey. And I think that, preserving that sense of wonder of how an ordinary piece of paper can suddenly take the imagination into this sort of epic space.
You just want them to avoid the storm drains because there's clowns under there.
That's what we're trying to capture in sort of in the name Paper Canoe. And for me, I was obsessed with making little boats and setting them down in the pond. I just thought it was so much fun to kind of think of this tiny little pond as a massive ocean and play with scale and let your imagination run wild.
Well, I like the title Paper Canoe, so that's interesting. And here's what my take is on it. Paper is something that, if it gets wet, it won't withhold. However, canoe is a progression. So it's almost like you're taking something from scratch and elevating it into something greater, forming something artistic. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, that's definitely in there. It's sort of like, with a little creativity, how can we transform things?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, you've been doing that for a long time, and of course, you're getting a little bit out of dancing, but I've seen some pictures of you online, some pictures of you dancing. So you certainly are very graceful in that area. And yeah, and
We did a dance film in Prague this year. I set a piece on a university in New York City, which was really wonderful. I love working with young dancers and kind of working as a mentor in that capacity. This Friday, I'm going to be working in the studio on a dance film. So I'm still keeping some of that going, even though the primary focus is with Paper Canoe right now.
Have you ever met Antonia Franceschi?
Jog my memory.
Well, the reason I bring it up, she was my first UK interview, and she was in the movie Fame, the 1980 movie.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, she was the ballet dancer. And I'm still connected with her, and she teaches ballet and stuff, and she's still very active in that. So you kind of put me in mind of her when you mentioned that you're into teaching this stuff, and yeah.
I totally know who she is. That now that you said Fame, yeah, I loved that movie as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, she's wonderful. She still looks good, and yeah, I see a lot of updates on classes she's teaching, and she was in Fame, and she was one of the backup dancers in Greece. So yeah, so she's still very active, and you're doing the same thing in New York. What's the weather like in Manhattan right now? Are you in Manhattan or New York?
I'm in Brooklyn.
Oh,
and
Brooklyn.
It's stormy. It's very rainy. It's kind of a strange week. It's a bit gray and drizzly. Yeah.
We got the sun out shining.
Now you're just boasting.
Actually, we just got done a major flood season here. Of course, we have it every year. I'm up on the hill, so I'm fine, but we had probably our worst one since 1973 or 74, they said, and yeah, but no, we're starting to get out of getting into the warmer weather here finally.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the spring and to the summer. It'll be really nice to have a little bit of sun.
Yes. Now, we got to talk about your new project, because I was just looking it up and I was reading up on it. It sounds very exciting. They say it's a cross between Clerks, and which is a movie I love, and Entourage. And I'd never watched the Entourage TV show, but I love the movie. It's called Ultra Low. And what made you decide to take a step back into the acting world?
Well, I was never entirely gone from the acting world, because I had been doing plays in New York.
Absolutely.
I was in a theater company for 7 years, and then I did some other off-Broadway shows. And then when I formed Paper Canoe, several of our projects were actually plays. So even though I wasn't acting commercially, I was always still involved in a lot of acting projects. But when Nick's script came across my desk, I just liked the premise that everything in it was real. I thought that it was kind of refreshing to have a film about making a film where everybody in the film is really doing what they're actually doing in the film. It's like somehow, this funny meta project where, and so when he asked me to come and do Q&A and play myself in the film, I thought that would be a really fun foray back into the world of film and kind of taste it again. And it was really, really fun. And obviously, it's not a very big stretch to play yourself. So it was kind of a fun thing to just show up and do a little bit of a Q&A for him in the film as me. And then after that, it was kind of really fun to find myself back on set, and I realized that actually I would like to start doing some acting. It hadn't really been something that I was interested in prior to that on a professional level, and so I started looking at more scripts and actually started to work on a concept with a director I found who I'm really excited about working with, and we're putting together a short that I'm really interested in sort of bringing to the finish line, but I can't talk about it yet.
That's okay. Well, I'll tell you what, when you can talk about it, you reach out to me.
I will.
Absolutely. I mean, this is free publicity for you. But I can't remember the director's name who directed Ultra Low. Talk about him a little bit.
Nicholas Gurney.
Okay.
Well, the truth is I met him through my publicist, who I love. I have a wonderful publicist named Clint from October Coast. And he connected me with Nick, and you know, I'm just very. It was fun to meet someone who is shining a light on the behind the scenes of making art. I think, you know, so often we just look at the finished product. And I think taking the curtain back and looking at the bones of it and how it's all put together and how many times it almost falls apart and all the, you know, duct tape that one uses to kind of get a project through the finish line. I think it's kind of a fun concept. And so I was really happy to join him and do that. But I was only on set for one day, so it was really a very fast cameo.
No luck dragons?
No luck dragons in this one. It's all reality.
Luck dragon's going to get upset.
I know. I hope you're the next one.
Well, I noticed you get to work with Lon Holly. Of course, I loved her in Dumb and Dumber, you know. I loved the red hair. I don't know why she ever turned it blonde or brown. I'm like, red hair is so rare, and she looks stunning in Dumb and Dumber. No wonder Jim Carrey went to Aspen after her. What was it like to work with her?
Well, like I said, it was really. I was only on set for one day, and the thing about films is you can be in films with lots of different people, but if you're not on shooting a scene with them, you wouldn't see them.
Oh, okay.
So we didn't actually have a scene together, so I didn't get to meet her in person.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because the film's not out, obviously. I just looked at what I saw there, but yeah. But it is kind of nice to see her in something like this, you know. Actually, I find that when you get some of these actors in these big Hollywood movies, they become very inaccessible, like you know, almost unapproachable. Whereas I find that people like where you're at, for example, you know, you're able to. You're a little more accessible, and I like that because it's more of a down-to-earth experience and not this red carpet scenario, which can be kind of a put-on when you see it on TV compared to what real life is. Yeah.
Well, I think maintaining, you know, a rigorous artistic practice and also a balanced life and you know, being able to connect with people is obviously really, really important. And I think there's definitely downsides to getting to a point where, you know, you're so famous or you're, you know, so inaccessible that it's hard to just have a human, simple conversation. I think that actually can be really painful on the side of the person on the red carpet. You know, I think it's sort of, there's a lot of, downsides to that, you know, from both ends.
Yeah, and I also think about a lot of the performers who've died of drugs, you know, because they can't cope with with actually I'm right now reading some stuff on John Belushi, who was to me one of the most talented people to come out of Saturday Night Live.
Incredible.
And yeah, and hearing about his death, and I've heard all really good things. I've interviewed 3 of the Blues Brothers, and a couple of people from Animal House, and I've heard really good things about interactions with them. But he obviously had his demons, and they caught up with him, and I think that's part of show business.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on the person. I know that I think that comedians in particular have to be so smart in order to kind of take painful things and turn them into something funny. Usually, you have to be really, really smart to be able to do that. And I think that you also have to be really sensitive, and so yeah, all of those sort of all that sensitivity, it has its upsides, but I'm sure it has its weight as well.
Well, according to what I've read on Internet Movie Database, Ultra Low, they say it's a cross between Clerks and Entourage. Have you seen any of those?
It's so funny. I am really more of a sci-fi fantasy girl, and I know of them, and I saw part of it, but it isn't sort of the genre that I typically gravitate to, although I really like the scripts, which is why I wanted to do it. But it's good for me because it's sort of expanding the types of movies I see. But if I'm really honest, when I buckle down and get myself in front of Netflix, it's always in the sort of sci-fi fantasy world. So that's what speaks to me generally.
What's your favorite sci-fi films?
Oh, I mean, in the right now, I watched 3%. It's like a really fun thing on Netflix that I saw right now. I wouldn't put it as, I'm just saying the things I'm watching right now. I love all the Harry Potters. I love Fantastic Beasts. I love Lord of the Rings. And I love The Shape of Water that just won the Academy Award. I just thought that film that's like, to me, that film was like an almost perfect film because, it just had everything that I love. It was like a work of art. Every frame is just so beautifully laid out, and the choreographer in me that, I pay a lot of attention to visuals and how things are placed within a shot. So there's the story, but then there's just also the visual language of it. And I just thought that the story was beautiful, that the acting was superb, just everything about it.
Were you a Star Wars fan growing up, speaking of sci-fi or Star Trek?
Yes, I was a huge Star Trek fan, huge Star Wars fan. Really, I love that whole, I love it all. I liked Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
I like it all.
One of my favorites growing up, I loved the original Clash of the Titans.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've done 2 tribute interviews in honor of Ray Harryhausen, the stop motion artist, and had somebody from his that worked closely with him at his company come on, and he and I have been in touch, and we've celebrated Ray's work, and we celebrated the 35th anniversary of Clash of the Titans a couple of years ago, and that's a film that resonated in my childhood, and Blade Runner, I really like that, and I even like the new Blade Runner. Yeah.
I loved the original Blade Runner, and I loved the new one.
Yep.
Brazil. Top favorite, film.
Oh yeah, Brazil was great. Actually, I interviewed somebody in tribute to somebody, and the person we were tributing, he was saying that they saw Brazil on acid in the theater once. Can you imagine seeing that film on acid?
That sounds really intense.
That film's kind of hard to decipher.
Yeah, just with a coffee, it's a lot. Yeah. True.
Yeah, but nope. And of course, that was done by Terry Gilliam, who's again an underrated great mind.
Oh my God, he's a genius. I mean, those are the kinds of directors that I'm totally obsessed with. Yeah.
Yes.
He's amazing.
Yes, of course, you worked with Wolfgang Peterson when you did Neverending Story. You still in touch with him any?
No, I'm not in touch with him. He was wonderful, and I really, really enjoyed who he was and how he treated us as kids on set. So it was a really nice experience working with him. But I'm not in touch with him. I'm, really, I'm in New York, and part of, Paper Canoe is starting to get back into the acting world, but we're still forming our own content. I'm really interested in staying in charge of the content that I create. I feel like it's really important for me as an artist to definitely I can be in things here and there, but overall I want to keep my hands kind of busy with building the story and having some say in the kind of content that gets put out there.
Absolutely. Well, according to Internet Movie Database, now, of course, these can all change, but they say the release date for Ultra Low is in December. Of course, that could change, but do you guys have any insight to where that's going to play, or like, I don't know how far through on you it's completed, is it not?
It's completed. It's making its way through the festival rounds right now.
Okay.
It was, in New York, and it's going to be in Hoboken and a bunch of other places in the festival circuit, but I'm not 100% sure where the final release date is going to be. But it's definitely on the festival circuit right now.
You think it's going to come through here in Canada?
I'm sure it will. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, I'd like to see the festival right here in my hometown grow bigger and get films like that, because this actually sounds like, when I see cross between Clerks and Entourage, I'm like, okay, this sounds like something that's totally up my alley.
Awesome. Well, that's so good to hear. I have to sign off in a couple minutes. I'm so sorry. I have to go pick up my daughter from school.
Well, you gotta send the Luck Dragon to do that.
But he needs someone to guide him.
Well, you know what, Tami? I thank you so much for coming back on here. It's been an honor, and like I said, just be patient on this. I'll let Clint know, and I will send a special thanks out to your man or your publicist, Clint Morris.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the first time I interviewed you, I got you through your webpage, but it was nice to talk to him, and he was very, very nice to me, and it was just an honor to have you come back on here.
Well, thank you so much for having me again, and enjoy the nice weather up there.
Before I let you go, would you mind very much doing a plug for my show?
Sure. Hi, this is Tami Stronach, and you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise out of New Brunswick,